we're going to be doing a review of Adherent Apologetics video called Why Does God Allow Evil? This video actually covers the problem of evil, and I think the problem of evil can kind of best be summed up as the notion of a all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-good God is not reconcilable with evil. Why would this all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good God allow evil to exist in the very world that he created if he is all good? If you're new to this channel, please give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. And if you want to take it one step farther, I'd really appreciate you hitting that subscribe button. It really helps me out. So without further ado, we are going to jump into this video.
The world to see where the atheist is coming from when they present the problem of evil. First, consider the many moral evils that seem to occur. Moral evils are events that occur because of a human being inflicting them. Events such as the Holocaust, rape, torture, and the constant human cycle of war and corruption are all examples of moral evils. I think it is perfectly fair for the skeptic to claim to see inconsistencies between certain aspects of the world and the claim that an all loving being is not behind it all. The second kind of evil is natural evil, which is, though not the product of human beings, but a product of the universe we live in. Earthquakes, hurricanes, and animal suffering are all examples of tragic events that have occurred throughout biological history, which have caused massive amounts of suffering. The final class of evils that we will consider overlaps with natural and moral evils, namely gratuitous evils. These are evils that occur without a morally sufficient good coming from them. The skeptic argues that an all loving God would prevent evils that do not occur for a greater good. So it seems as if the existence of gratuitous evils challenges the idea of the existence of God.
So I can just agree right off the bat with the moral evils and the natural so-called evils. The last one, I don't buy this argument at all. I don't think the skeptic argues that an all-loving God would prevent evils that do not occur for a greater good. I think that an all-loving God would prevent all evils, period. There's no such thing as an evil that the means justify the ends. When you're a God, when you are an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving God, you're all powerful. You can just do the good thing. You can just have the outcome. You can take the evil thing that led up to it completely out of the picture. If you're an all-knowing, all-powerful God that has to do evil for a greater good outcome, then you're no longer all-loving because you can't think of a way. Now, you would also not be all-knowing. You can't think of a way to get to this greater good outcome without doing the evil thing in the first place. This is a really long video and I tend to ramble on a lot, so I'll try to keep it to a minimum. But I mean, there's problems with this already, but we'll go with the moral evil and the natural evil. And I'm just leaving out the I don't know why you would say the skeptic argues that an all-loving God would prevent evils that do not occur for a greater good. This is not I'm a skeptic. This is not an argument that I would ever make. An all-knowing and all-good and all-powerful God would just do the thing that is the greater good without the evil leading up to it.
So, with the logical problem of evil, it attempts to show that there's a logical inconsistency in believing in an all loving, all powerful, and all knowing God when considering the existence of evil.
Um, so you left out all good, and I think all loving is not all good, because this God, the Christian God specifically, the God that I'm assuming you're referring to, is also all good. He's the epitome of good. He cannot do evil. Everything he does is perfect, is good. And you're leaving that out. And I don't know if you're doing that intentionally, but it's important because that's kind of the crux of this argument. Evil and love are not antonyms. They're not. It's good and evil, and you're leaving good out of this argument. But let's keep going.
Arguments against God's existence based on the existence of evil date back to the Greek philosopher Epicurus, who
So I don't know the Greek philosopher Epicurus's argument against the problem of evil, because as far as I can tell, up until Jesus, God was not up until Jesus, long after Jesus. Let's be clear. It's supposedly until Jesus, but this whole notion of an all-loving Jesus and all great, wonderful Jesus didn't come till quite some time after Jesus. But I don't know why roughly 300 years before Jesus, somebody would be making an argument against this God who was definitely, according to the Old Testament, a jealous, vengeful, and very, very spiteful God. I don't think he was considered an all good God back in, pre-Jesus. But let's keep going.
Lived from about 341 to 270 BC. A more modern version of the problem of evil is given by philosopher J.L. Mackie. Mackie in 1955 explained the problem of evil as such, quote, God is omnipotent, God is wholly good, and yet evil exists.
Okay,
There
so
seems
he does that. He does at least add the good into the argument.
to be some contradiction between these three propositions, so that if any two of them were true, the third would be false, end quote. The logical problem of evil aims to show that if God truly was all loving, he would do all that he could to prevent evil.
I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's the case. I don't know your name, adherent apologetics, but I don't think that's the case. Um it's not an all loving God. It's an all good God. And this is the second time now. You just read the argument from philosopher J.L. Mackie. You just read it. Literally the sentence before this. God is wholly good. And then when you come to kind of wrap that up, you leave it out and go back to this all loving notion. But like the contrast of evil is not love. It's good. And you're leaving that out.
Evil from occurring. In addition, since God is omnipotent, meaning he could do all things, he would be able to prevent all evils from occurring, from rape to hurricanes to animal suffering.
Yes.
But since God doesn't prevent these evils, he must not be all loving and all powerful. So in all
Once again, sir, you have left out the crux of the argument. If he does not prevent these evils, he must not be all good. You're leaving that out.
loving, all powerful God does not exist.
No, 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 no. Not an all loving, an all good God cannot exist when he allows evil to exist in his world. This is his creation. He did this. He made it this way. And I know the fall, and I know the whole story. We're fallen. This isn't God's ideal. It's not the way he wanted it to be. But whatever. He's God. He can do whatever he wants. And evil exists in his creation.
When responding to the logical problem of evil, it's important to remember the burden of the person presenting the argument to provide a sound argument with valid premises that has a conclusion that follows.
Okay.
With regard to the logical problem of evil, Mackie in 1955 further elaborates on his argument by writing, quote, good is opposed to evil.
Do you hear that? You do you hear good as opposed to evil? And every time you put your own thoughts into it, you make the contrast love and evil. But it's here. You're reading it, man. Good is opposed to evil.
In such a way that a good thing always eliminates evil as far as it can, and there are no limits to what an omnipotent thing can do.
True.
From these, it follows that a good omnipotent thing eliminates evils completely, and then the proposition that a good omnipotent thing exists and that evil exists are incompatible. End quote.
I think that's pretty fair.
Mackey's 1955 argument can be formulated as follows. Premise 1, if God exists, evil would not exist. Premise 2, evil exists.
No, 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 no. No, I don't think you haven't set up the syllogism is not correct. You're leaving it out again. If an all good God exists, evil would not exist. Evil exists, therefore an all good God does not exist. The problem of evil does not disprove God's existence. It disproves an all good God's existence. I disagree with your syllogism right off the bat.
So the conclusion, premise 3, therefore God does not exist. However, I think hope is not lost for the theist. If the theist
It is. It 100% is. If you're arguing for the existence of an all good, all knowing, and all powerful God, the problem of evil, I feel, is an absolute defeater. Because this God doesn't allow some evils to exist. Why would he allow some evils to occur and some evils to not occur? There would be no good reason for it. So this all good God who allows some evils to exist and does not allow some evils to exist is, I think, kind of a defeater for this specific version of God.
These can show that there's good reason to think that one of the premises is false. There would be good reason to doubt the conclusion.
Well, sure, dude. If you set up your own premises that that are incorrect for the argument to begin with, yeah, it's pretty easy to knock them down. You've created a straw man. You straw manned the problem of evil because you left out the good. You left out the good part of the evil, the contrast of evil. You left that out of your premises. So you're setting this up, and yeah, I think you're going to be able to knock it down because the word good doesn't appear in your syllogism at all. I'm
Evil would
correct
not
about that,
exist.
right?
Premise
Yeah,
2.
evil exists. The evil is in your premises, but the word good isn't. So you're going to be able to knock that argument down. I'm an atheist and I can knock this argument down. I already did. If God exists, evil would not exist. That's not true. A God can exist and evil can exist. Your first premise, yes, you set it up to be so easily defeated.
Evil exists. So the conclusion, premise 3, therefore, God does not exist.
All right,
I
we'll
think
keep
there is
going.
good reason to accept premise 2 of my formulation of the logical problem of evil, namely that evil exists. The question is whether the first premise would be
You think there's good reason to accept that? Yeah, yes, yeah. I mean, yeah, okay.
true. If God exists, would he always eliminate evil?
If a good God exists, if no, it's see, I'm even messing up my own argument. An all good God exists. If an all good God exists, the epitome of good, there can be nothing gooder than this God. It's important, and I really don't know if you're leaving that out purposely, or if you just didn't think about it enough, or what. But that really is the crux of the argument. If you leave out the all good part of this God, then there is no problem of evil because he's not all good. Of course, there can be evil. But when you throw in that all good part, that's when the problem of evil becomes a defeater for this specific version of God.
I think the answer is no. While the rest of this chapter will further dive into plausible reasons for why God would allow evil, it's fruitful at this point to give you a taste of what is to come. There are many plausible reasons to think that an all powerful, perfectly good God would allow evil.
Okay, so I appreciate you putting that in. Perfectly good God. You've finally added in the word good to your argument. But there is not one reason, and I haven't watched this video, but I'm telling you right now, there is not one reason that a perfectly good God would allow evil to exist. Not one single reason. At least no good one. No, there's no reason. There's just no reason.
Plausible reasons for why God would allow evil, it's fruitful at this point to give you a taste of what is to
Oh, I
come.
went back a little too
There are many
far.
plausible reasons to think that an all powerful, perfectly good God would allow evil. First, evil may be the result of God creating free creatures who have the freedom to choose to do good or evil actions. Second, evil may be the result of
Okay, allowing a creature to do free actions is not necessarily good when those free actions are evil. We could just have all of the freedom but none of the evil. We don't have to have the freedom to be able to murder, so that's not freedom. That's awful. That's not good. No good God would ever create a creature unless he wanted them. No all good God, I'll sum this up. No all good God would knowingly create a creature that he knew was going to do evil. He knew this creature was going before Adam and Eve. God had already known. He's all knowing. He already knew that his creations were going to do evil. Why not just create it in such a way where he knew they would not do evil? It's very simple
God creating a noble
for a God, of course.
natural order, which allows for goods such as scientific discovery, intelligibility, and a moral arena.
What? Evil may be the result of God creating a knowable natural order which allows for good, such as scientific. Evil may be the result of. I don't know what you mean by
Third,
that.
evil allows for some human autonomy from God. If there was no evil whatsoever and God valued human choice, how could we ever choose to be with him if we never experienced separation from him?
Whoa, whoa, whoa. What do you mean? We are already experiencing the separation from him. We live on earth. He does not. We've already experienced the separation. So your third is, yeah, I don't understand your second one. Maybe you'll go into it a little bit more later. The first one, I don't see how it would address hurricanes and earthquakes and natural disasters, but it still doesn't really address human evil, because I can imagine a scenario. Okay, I'll just let me put this forward. Let's just say that currently, or throughout all human time, humans had the ability to think really hard and kill the person they're thinking about. Let's just say that that was a thing. That's just it's natural, it's normal. That's just something humans can do. We would be sitting here having a discussion about whether or not we should be allowed to do that. And you would be saying, well, yes, because if you weren't allowed to do that, that would go against your free will to kill humans with your mind bullets. But we can't do that. Why are we not allowed to do that? Why am I not physically capable of doing this evil thing? I can't do it. I can't think and kill the person that I'm thinking about. That's something that God has prevented me from doing. He has impeded on my free will. He has barred me from doing this. He did not create me in such a way that I am able to think about somebody and kill them. I was not created to do that. So why not take it one step further where I was not created to be able to, I am barred from taking somebody else's life at all. Why not do that? He's already cut my free will to do the mind bullets thing. Why not cut my free will or impede on my free will to do murder at all? And even just that would be a more moral world than the one that he actually created. If he just stopped the murder and not the cancer and, like you said, the rapes and the earthquakes and the diseases and all of the evil atrocities of this world, even just taking that one away would be a better world than the one that he created. But all right, see, this is what I was talking about. Let's keep going. Let's keep going.
Fourth, in Christianity, there is a promise that evil will not last forever, but is a temporary pain to bring about God's great plan for the world.
Again, why not just bring about the great plan for the world without the temporary pain? Why would a God who is all good and all loving allow pain and suffering? It's despicable. I wouldn't do it. Am I already better than your God? If I had the choice to create a world, if I had the ability to create a world, none of this would be in it. And I think that's already demonstrably better than the world that your God has created.
I don't think that any of these 4 points are decisive defeaters that will end the debate.
They're not they're not they're not decisive defeaters, they're not defeaters. They're not even good arguments. They're really bad arguments. They're really bad.
Over the problem of evil. However, these 4 do not need to serve that purpose for the logical problem to fail. It is the burden of the proponent of the argument to show why the reasons to doubt the truth of the first premise fall short. If any of my reasons to doubt the first premise are convincing to you, then you should not accept the first premise of the argument, which would then leave the logical problem of evil broken.
So I don't accept your first premise, which, oh man. All right, what are we at? 5:30. I don't accept your first premise. And it's not because the problem of evil fails, it's because you set up your first premise to not include the problem of evil. You set this up to fail. I mean, I already went over it, so I won't do it again, but you designed this to fail because you left out the word good. You left out the word all good. If an all good God exists, evil would not exist. But you left that out. So of course the premise fails because you're arguing this. Okay. Where are we at? 5:30. So how do I how do we take this? So you don't think any of these 4 points are decisive feeders that will end the debate over the problem of evil? Of course they're not, because they're not defeaters. They're not even good arguments against it. I don't understand your second one, but I've already argued against the other three. It is a burden of the proponent's argument. Okay, I did that. But I don't understand your second one. Maybe we'll get into it. Then you should not be able to accept. So I don't accept the first premise, but that's not because you have good arguments or because that you have convinced me in one direction or the other. It's because you just failed to set up a proper syllogism. I mean, the syllogism it's proper. Don't get me wrong. It's not like it's invalid or anything, but it's just a straw man of the actual argument because you left out the most important part of it.
Then you should not accept the first premise of the argument, which would then leave the logical problem of evil broken.
Absolutely not.
Now, let's think about the evidential problem of evil. While there are many different forms of an evidential argument, a general formulation goes like this. Premise 1, the existence of evil is more likely on atheism than theism. So, premise 2, the existence of evil is evidence for atheism.
The evidence problem of evil. The existence of evil is more likely on atheist. You mean the existence of evil is more likely to be a evil is more likely to exist when there is no God? Is that what you're getting at? So the existence of evil is evidence for atheism. No, definitely not. This is a poor argument too. I don't know. I applaud you because I haven't heard this, that the problem of evil the problem of evil only discredits one thing, an all good God. That's it. It does. I mean, you could just like the Old Testament God. It wouldn't do anything to disprove that God, or the other religions, the thousands of other gods to exist. It just disproves any God that claims to be all good. That's the only thing it addresses. You can have evil and a God. The problem of evil has nothing to do with atheism. It has nothing to do with atheism. Not one single thing. It's just the all good God. That's the only thing it addresses.
These arguments don't set out to prove that God does not exist, but rather to show that the existence of certain kinds of evils would be more expected on atheism than theism.
I don't agree with this. I mean, I'm an atheist. I don't agree with this. It makes more sense. I would argue that it makes more sense that the world is the way the world is, because there is no great designer or planner or creator. It just things just happen.
These may have other pieces of evidence, such as consciousness, fine tuning, and religious experience for
Whoa.
the existence of God.
Oh boy.
The evidential arguments from evil don't serve to deny these pieces of evidence. In other words, evidential arguments from evil focus on a particular event, say moral evil, animal suffering, gratuitous suffering, something along these lines, and then argue that this event would be more likely to occur if atheism is true than theism. So consider the purpose of evidential arguments. Tom is a true agnostic, meaning that he sees the question of the existence of God just as likely as the non-existence of God. Tom is 50-50 on the
So that's not a being 50. You can't be 50-50 on the existence of God. This is not agnostic. If you're agnostic, you are an atheist, because you can't, if you don't know, if you are not convinced that a God exists, then you are an atheist. You're not necessarily asserting that you believe that a God doesn't exist. You're simply saying that you don't know if a God exists. But if you don't know if a God exists, then you don't believe that a God exists, and that would make you an atheist. Agnostics are not 50-50. There's no such thing as 50-50. Like, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. I mean, all right, let's keep going.
the question of does God exist before having any knowledge about the problem of evil. When Tom considers the existence of evil, Tom's view on the probability of God existence changes. Tom believes that evil is what would be expected if there was no God, whereas it is unlikely that the event would occur if God existed. Tom now concludes that the existence of evil would be more likely to be true under atheism than theism. So Tom is now 75% confident God does not exist after considering an evidential argument from evil.
So I can see why for the purpose of the argument, you're putting, nobody's 75% sure, but I think I understand what you're getting at here. So I take back what I said. You're not really you don't mean 50%, 50%. You mean you're just unsure. You're not 75%, but you're just giving numbers to okay. All right. All right.
This is the basic structure of an evidential argument. Note that the power of these arguments exposes the person based nature of justification. In my story, Tom moves from being 50-50 on the existence of God to being 75% sure that God doesn't exist after considering the argument from evil. However, these arguments do not always work in this way, as shifts in the confidence levels are often dependent on the person considering the argument. One could say that the argument is successful and then conclude that there's only now a 51% chance God does not exist.
Okay, I take back what I think I take back what I just said. You really are going with somebody as 51%. How can you be 51% sure that a God does not exist? How can you be 52.1457% sure? What are you getting at here, dude?
Or a 99% chance that God does not exist. The power of an evidential argument is often in the eyes of the beholder.
All right.
Here's one concern I have with the problem of evil. It assumes that conscious life exists. So when someone claims that the existence of evil would be more likely on atheism than theism, we may ask first, what does atheism actually predict?
Atheism does not predict anything. Not one thing. There is no predictions made by atheism. It doesn't even predict that a God does not exist. Atheism is, are you convinced a God exists? If the answer is no, you're an atheist. That's atheism. It goes no further than that. There's nothing else to say about it. There's no further points to make. There's no further arguments. That's it. If the answer is yes, you're a theist. Then in full stop. That's it. Atheism doesn't predict anything.
Does atheism predict that 10 people would exist or 10 million?
It predicts neither. What are you talking about? No, you're correct. It seems neither. Okay. Oh, my bad. All right, I got ahead of myself. Atheism doesn't predict that conscious life would exist either, because it makes no predictions. Atheism makes no predictions. It's simply being unconvinced that a God exists.
It seems neither.
What do you mean?
Atheism doesn't predict that conscious life would exist either, and you need conscious life for there to be evil. Atheism doesn't even predict the existence of a universe at all.
That's true, because atheism is being it makes no predictions. This is really, if you choose to watch my response to your video, please take this to heart. This is a bad argument. This is a really bad argument. Atheism makes no predictions. It's not about making predictions. It's not a worldview. It tells you nothing about a person or what they believe or how the universe got started or how life got started. It tells you nothing about any of that. It tells you one thing and one thing only. You are unconvinced that God exists. That is it. This is a really bad argument.
If neither hypothesis predicts the data in question, means more likely than not to occur, then it will be challenging for the data to provide strong weight toward either view. The existence of evil is not expected given atheism because atheism does not predict the existence of conscious life. However, theism does predict the existence of conscious life.
What? Okay. Theism does not predict anything. Again, theism is okay. Theism has not made one single prediction. It cannot predict things. Theism, all right, we're going to go on with the argument, but theism does not make predictions either. It doesn't predict that conscious life will exist. Conscious life existed long before theism existed.
I do think that certain evils, assuming that conscious
You're predicting it. So okay.
life exists, are more likely to be true on atheism than theism. But if God exists, there may be some reason to think that God would create a world in which evil exists.
No.
One way of addressing
No. Okay, if God exists, yes. But again, you're leaving out the all good part.
the evidential problem of
Oh my god, this is so much. He wrote so much, man.
evil also is to think that some evils
All right, I'm going to skip ahead because this evidential problem of evil, that atheism is more likely to be true because evil exists in the world, it's a really bad argument. It's not an argument that I, as an atheist, would make. And it just, it's, it's boring, I guess. All right, all right, let's go. Let's
Are
go.
just
We'll give
evidence
you the
for
full video.
atheism. Perhaps one may believe that atheism better explains the existence of evil than theism. If this is the case, the question
Nobody. All right.
is how much did the problem of evil move us towards atheism?
Okay, I got to just say it. I'm going to say it one more time, and I think this will kind of address this whole evidential problem of evil argument. Theism and atheism, evil can exist under both views. If you don't believe that a God exists, evil can absolutely exist. If you do believe that a God exists, evil can absolutely still exist. This is just a bad argument. I don't know what we're talking about.
Consider Tom, who's 50-50 on the existence of God. Perhaps Tom doesn't think that theism can explain animal suffering as well as atheism. Should Tom now be 51% confident in atheism or 95%? I say more like 51% because evil is only one piece of a much larger picture. Susie is 95% confident that God exists before encountering the argument from evil. Should she now be moved from like 95% confidence in theism to 50%, 94%, or something else? If, as this video in this book series, well, it's not a book series, but it's a video series, argues, atheism cannot explain things such as fine tuning, moral knowledge, reason, and personal experience, the question becomes whether the existence of evil can outweigh all the other.
Okay, I'm not going to address the fine-tuning moral knowledge, reason, and personal experience arguments here because it has nothing to do with the problem of evil. What is moral knowledge? How do you okay, we're not addressing it. We're not doing it.
Theism. I think not. Atheism does not even predict that conscious life would exist. So one option for theists is that they can concede the problem of the, they can concede one option for the theist is that they can concede the problem and argue that evil is not strong evidence against the existence of God. Second, I don't believe there are many.
Dude, how many times am I going to have to repeat this in this video? I'm just assuming that you're going to get it wrong the entire video. But it's important to call it out. Every single time you leave out the crux of the argument, I'm going to have to call it out because I think it's important to show that you are setting up a straw man of the problem of evil. Okay, I'm going to read your line here. So one option for theists is that they can concede the problem and argue that evil is not strong evidence against the existence of God. And that's true. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the existence of an all good and all loving God. You can ignore it, sure, but you're just lying to yourself at that point. But you're leaving that out. So I'm going to point it out every single time that you leave it out because it's important. All right.
If any, instances of evil that cannot be explained by theism. I'm willing to grant that evil.
Cancer. Childhood cancer. Parasites. Amoebas that eat children's eyeballs. Please explain these things and make them compatible with an all good, all loving, all knowing, all powerful God. Make those compatible. Make me see why an all good, all loving, all knowing, and all powerful God would allow, not just allow, but create a bacteria that can eat a child's eyeballs out of their skull. Why would he create this? Why would he allow this? He's all powerful. He's all good. Why would he allow a baby to be born and suffer an excruciating short life only to die? Please explain that. I would love to know your response to that.
Evil is expected on atheism, again, assuming that conscious life exists, which is a big assumption. But I do believe that there are.
I'm willing to grant that evil is expected on atheism, assuming conscious life exists. That's not a big assumption. You don't have to assume that conscious life exists. You are conscious. You are life. You exist. There's no assumptions to be made. I don't know what you're talking about.
There are numerous reasons to think that evil would not have a low likelihood of existing given theism. In the next section of this video, I will develop a more complete response to why God allows evil. For an evidential argument to be powerful, it must point to specific evils that cannot be explained by defenses advocated by theists. I don't believe that there are any such evils that theism cannot adequately explain.
Uh, you're making that assertion, but I very much challenge you to tell me why there is a right now at this very moment somewhere in the world absolutely heinous and despicable, disgusting things are being done to some child. Tell me one good reason for it. I started. It's getting just a slight bit agitated at your response here because it's borderlining disgusting. What I'm hearing is slavery apologetics, rape apologetics. So please explain to me why that child who will die today in just a few moments, explain to me how that can be compatible with an all good, all loving, all knowing God.
My basic thought is this: God allows evil for the preservation of human freedom, which allows for humans to grow individually, together, and with God.
God allows evil for the preservation of human freedom, which allows humans to grow individually, together, and with God. Okay, so I've already addressed this. God has already taken away my human freedom to kill people with my mind bullets. Why can't he take it one step further and take away my freedom to kill at all? Or make it just one way. Again, if killing people with your mind was natural, was just a normal thing that everybody was used to, you would be making the argument that taking that away would be going against my free will. But we don't have that ability. It's already been taken away. My free will to do that has already been impeded upon. So why does he allow some versions of murder and not others? Why not all versions? Why not all ways that the human brain can think of? Why not allow those? Allow humans to grow individually, together, and with God. So what about that child that I was just referring to a moment ago, who will have despicable, horrible, heinous things done to them, and then they will be murdered? How did this allow that human to grow individually, together, or with God? They're dead. They suffered. It was terrible. Where's the growth? All right, let's keep going.
First, the Christian view is that the world we live in is imperfect.
That's not the Christian view. That's just that's the view. Nobody thinks that the world is perfect. Every single person on this earth can conceive of a way in which this world would be better. Yet, this is the world that God decided to create.
Romans 8:22 writes, quote, "The whole creation has been growing together in the pains of childbirth until now," end quote. One of the central claims of the proponent of an argument from evil is that God would create a world with no or little suffering because of God's perfect love.
Not necessarily, not because of his perfect love, but because he is all good. This God is all good. Why would he create a world that isn't all good?
However, a central Christian claim is that we live in a world with suffering given by God to serve certain purposes. It's important to consider
What? Okay.
God's purposes in allowing evil according to the biblical text. One great example of God's
So it's important to consider God's purposes in allowing evil according to biblical text. But the problem is that us as humans, we can't know the God's purpose in allowing evil. We can't consider God's purpose. You don't know God's purpose. Are you claiming that you know God's purpose? That you know God, the mind of God? What is God's purpose in allowing some child out there to have a bacteria in their brain that's literally causing excruciating pain until they die by eating it? these nasty bacteria exist, what is God's purpose in that? Because it's important to consider God's purpose. So tell me. You tell me what would God's purpose would be in allowing that evil. I don't think anybody can have an answer to that. There's no good that can come from that. That's just okay.
God's purpose in allowing evil is seen in John
You don't know God's purpose, so you can't consider God's purpose.
9, 1 through 3. The author writes, quote, "As he passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, 'Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?'"
Okay, I don't care about John. I don't care about anything the Bible has to say. I really don't. And if you think that because he was born blind, if you think that's evil, you're so far from the evils of this world. Somebody being born blind, I wouldn't consider evil. You can still live a very happy, healthy, fulfilling life even if you were born blind. It's unfortunate and it's sad, and everybody should everybody should be able to experience, especially if we're God's perfect creations. We're not perfect anymore, I get that, but we're the creations of a God, yet we still have the ability to go blind or be born blind in the first place is also ridiculous. But being born blind, I wouldn't consider an evil of this world. Being born with some type of terrible, excruciatingly disgusting disease, that's an evil of this world, to where you will only know suffering and death. From birth to death, all you know is suffering. Don't get into it. Don't just This is like you're sugarcoating what evil is. Think about the experiments that were done on humans during the Nazi regime. The medical experiments. That's evil. Why is God allowing this evil to exist? But we'll keep on.
Jesus answered, It was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him." End quote. From this passage, God's purposes for this world can be seen with greater clarity. This text shows that God isn't interested in maximizing pleasure or minimizing pain. God is interested in creating beings who manifest God's image and radiate his glory.
So manifest God's image and radiate is God blind? What does that mean? You just said nothing. That if anybody ever wonders what a deipity is, this is a perfect example. This is a perfect example of a deipity, where you say words that sound so like the light shone through his heart so bright that a fire rose up through the seas and the oceans came down upon my dazzling eyes. None of that made any sense. What does that? What does any of that mean? None of that meant anything, but it's just meant to sound like poetic, but it doesn't mean anything. God is interested in creating beings who manifest God's image and radiate his glory. What? First off, that guy was blind. But God is interested in creating beings who manifest. What about the being that he created who has whose heart is born with their heart on the outside of their body, and then they just die? What glory was radiated? What are you talking about? This is
God is interested in creating beings who manifest God's image and radiate his glory. Furthermore, evil also allows us to grow.
If you want, and I'm not necessarily telling anybody who might come across this video or get this far into the video, I'm not telling you to do this, but maybe consider it. And just remember that once you see something, you can't unsee it. So proceed with your own, proceed with caution. But just Google like worst diseases children can have. Just Google that and go to images and tell me what you see. Tell me if any of those images are radiating God's glory. We'll keep going.
Consider the creation of Adam and Eve. They're created with the task of manifesting God's image and being stewards of creation. Perhaps God's final purpose for us may be similar. Heaven isn't an eternal worship concert, but rather a new creation in which we'll be given responsibilities. Evils in
Okay. Furthermore, evil allows us to grow. This is really bad because I mean, I kind of feel like I'm repeating myself, and that's because I am. Because you are also repeating yourself. Now, it's not furthermore evil allows us to grow. You literally just said that. You're saying once again, evil allows us to grow. You said that grow individually and with God or whatever. But again, I'm repeating myself because the person who is being assaulted somewhere in a dark basement night after night after night after night until they're dead, um that person, I'm gonna break this to you now. That person didn't grow. They died. They were tortured and they died. Did the person who was doing the torturing, did it allow them to grow? What are you talking about? Consider the creation of Adam and Eve. They were created with the task of manifesting God's image and being stewards of creation. Perhaps God will
In
find
this life help
purpose.
us to develop a character that will impact us in the next life.
Um, Heaven isn't an eternal worship concert, but rather a new creation in which we will be given responsibilities. Evils in this
John
life.
Hick in 1991 writes that virtues, quote, which have been
Sorry, I fell behind. Hold on. But rather a new creation in which we'll be given responsibilities. Okay, that has nothing to do with the problem of evil. Evil in this life helps us develop a character that will impact us in the next. What about the babies who die of cancer? What character what character development did you gain as an infant? Come on, dude. This is bad. This is really bad arguments.
formed within
Which for
the agent as a hard-won deposit of her own decisions in situations of challenging temptation are intrinsically more valuable than virtues created within her ready-made and without any effort on her own part. And
um what which have been formed within the agent as hard-won deposits. See, you're thinking of the problem of evil as like somebody who just was struggling through life and they got fired from their job and maybe they had to go on welfare for a while, but then they were homeless, but then they met somebody and then they got pregnant and had a kid, and then they got a job working part-time and then they worked their way up to management and now they have a good life. This is how you're writing the problem of evil. But struggling isn't evil. Character development in adversity isn't evil. We're talking about despicable, heinous, terrible, terrible things. So you haven't addressed the natural argument yet. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. I don't know. But somewhere there was an earthquake and there was a little child. And I keep going back to the child thing because I think, yeah, I'm pulling on the heartstrings a little bit, but it hits a little bit different when it's a child. I have children and I know it hits me differently. So, somewhere right now, there was an earthquake and a piece of rubble fell on some small innocent child. And, you know, the rubble fell and crushed him right below the ribs. And everything below their rib cage was absolutely disintegrated by this building collapse. And then they will, not quite enough to kill them instantly, but just long enough to suffer for maybe 30 or 40 minutes before they bled out. Are you going to get into this evil? Are you going to say that that was character development? Get into the crux of the argument instead of this sugar coated struggles through adversity argument. This isn't evil. All right.
quote, courage in the face of adversity is good. Perseverance through challenge is good. And love through difficulties is good.
Perseverance through challenges is good. Courage in the face of adversity is good. And love through difficulties is good. But none of this addresses the problem of evil. What are you talking about?
Finally, in Christianity, evil is a temporary thorn as God promises triumph over evil. Christianity holds that God will defeat evil at the eschaton. The world of suffering we experience will be transformed into a new creation. The evils of this world are temporary, and the next life is so much better than we can ever imagine. Death, I believe, is like waking up from a dream. The evils we experience in this life are a tiny but important part of what God has planned, as Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 2:9.
I don't care what Paul has to say about evil because this is the life that we know exists. This is the life that we have to experience. And it's the only one that we know for sure that we're going to get. Why would we have to spend it suffering? And why do some people suffer more than others? And why does some people suffer considerably less than others? Some people are very fortunate and very, very, very blessed and just don't really have to experience a whole lot of suffering. And some people have it so bad. Um why would they have to spend the one go around they have in misery and pain and suffering? Sometimes the pain and suffering can last a very long time. Look up the stories of people who were abducted as kids and then they were captured, and you can only imagine the things that were done for 20 or 30 years. And that's their whole life. Character development, courage in the face of adversity, perseverance through a challenge. It's despicable and it's heinous. No good God, no all good God would allow this to happen. Do you listen to your own arguments?
End quote. But as it is written,
I don't care
what
what
no
Paul
eye
has
has
to say.
seen, nor ear heard, nor the heart of man imagined, what God has planned or what God has prepared for those who love him. End quote. So, why would God allow moral evils such as stealing, genocide, and other horrendous deeds done by human beings? I believe that God allows these moral evils for numerous reasons. Again, this is what I think. I'm not claiming to know the mind of God, but given my status of where I'm at,
So you're currently acknowledging that you don't know the mind of God, but just before you said it's important to consider what God, the mind of God, while openly acknowledging that you can't consider the mind of God. Bad arguments, dude.
at right now, this is what I would say. First, these evils are caused by God giving humans freedom. One's choice to conduct these horrific acts
Oh boy. So okay, so once again, we're not going further. You're just repeating yourself again, which is going to cause me to repeat myself, which is going to make for a very boring video.
is the result of God granting them free will to do so.
Okay, so I've already addressed this, but I will address it again. First off, one's choice to conduct these horrific acts is a result of God granting them free will to do so. What about the person's free will that the horrific acts are being conducted on? Why don't they have the free will to stop those horrific acts from being conducted on them? Why didn't God give them a choice? Why is it the evil? It's almost as if evil takes precedence. The free will to do evil takes precedence over the free will to stop the evil. Because why wouldn't God give up the power of the victim of the situation to stop the evil from happening upon them? God says, no, no, no. The evildoer must have his way. I don't know. But again, yeah, so that's kind of a new argument that I've brought in. But God has already stopped me from committing from committing horrific acts, like with the mind bullets. God has stopped me from doing that. Why didn't he give me this power? Why is God impeding on my free will to think about somebody really hard and have their head explode? Why did God do this to me? Why? Oh, why?
God gives us free will because it gives us the ability to work together and to freely choose him. These are good things that require
You can work together and freely choose God, but still not be able to do evil. You can still not do evil and reject God. You can not have the capability to murder somebody and also not want to accept Jesus Christ. Both, you
humans
can
to
do
be free.
both.
Second, I believe that
And if you want proof of this, Satan himself, Lucifer, 100% knows of God's existence, and yet he still freely chooses to reject him. Now, that's more of an argument against like this divine hiddenness, but it does go to show that you can do evil, or you can be prevented from doing evil and also still reject God.
Tragic events can draw us closer to knowing God. Pain is a means by which God wakes.
Oh, what are you, Mother Teresa? Pain, tragic events can draw us closer to knowing God. You know what else can do that? Uh, Wonderful events, great events, miraculous events, good events. Those can bring us closer to God. If God came down and was like, "Hey, are you hungry? Here's some food." That would bring me closer to God. That's for sure. You know what wouldn't bring me closer to God? Being assaulted in some closet for like 47 years. That does not bring me closer to God. This is so bad. This is such a bad argument. The only thing, okay, we're going to keep going.
Wakes us up to our need of Him. When my friends died, the suffering felt by myself and others because of their death helped us to realize the fragility of life and the importance of coming to know God. Moral
How?
evils are the result of human freedom, which God can then utilize to bring about greater goods, such as people turning to God and following Him.
Utilize evil to bring about a greater good, and this greater good that you're claiming will happen as people are turning to God and following him, that's the greater good. What's good about turning to God and following him? How is this a net gain? How is this a moral positive?
Finally, moral evils allow us to grow. Through experiencing suffering, we can
Finally, dude, this is such a repeat. I have nothing else to add to this. You're repeating yourself.
learn and grow as humans. Honesty is valued after experiencing dishonesty, love after hate, triumph after disappointment. If we were created perfect, we would not be able to grow.
We don't have to be created perfect. Nobody is making this argument that we have to be created perfect in order to not suffer miserable and terrible lives. I don't suffer a miserable and terrible life by any means. I'm speaking about the people that do. You don't have to create a perfect world in order to not have your eyeballs eaten out by some amoeba. You don't have to create a perfect world or be a perfect being to not be assaulted, to not be experimented on, to not. That's not. That's far from perfection. You could just take away. Let's keep
Why
going.
would God allow natural
Okay, so we are going to get into the natural disasters. This is going to be a really long video. It's going to be. What are we at? What are we at? 57 minutes. Oh boy. Okay. All right. Nobody's getting this far, but let's keep
evils such
going.
as hurricanes? One idea about why God would allow natural evil is to allow for a knowable natural.
Okay, you know what? Actually, we're going to stop this here at 1 hour and we'll pick this back up with going. No. We'll pick it back up at.
Nor ear heard, nor the heart of man imagined what God has planned or what God has prepared.
Where were we
Pleasure or
at?
minimizing 1 through 3. The author writes, quote, as he passed by, he saw a man blind from birth, and his disciples asked him, "Rather the world to be autonomous from God?" Here's what I mean. Let's say that God creates a world with a noble natural order,
Okay. I don't. Where were we at, man? Right. I thought we were at.
evil, and some varieties of human freedom. If we lived in a world
Okay.
without noble natural,
We're going to pick it back up right here with going further. We're going to get into the natural disasters side of this argument. But so far, it's been wholly unconvincing. You set up a very, just a bad syllogism that, in regards to the problem of evil, your syllogism is valid, but it just doesn't address this problem. It addresses God's existence, but not an all good God's existence. And that's really the crux of this argument: is an all good God compatible with the problem of evil? But this is a very long video so far. Apparently I have a lot to say, so we're going to keep it at just under an hour. And we will pick this back up with part 2, and we'll kick it off right here. If you made it this far, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. If you're new, give me a thumbs up and take it one step further and hit the subscribe button. Share this video around. That would be great. But until next time.